Greetings all, and welcome to the 31st episode of the V.T.P, or the Veteran Trainer's Perspective. Today, we're going to be doing something a little different than normal, as today, I want to take a bit of a minimalistic approach to this episode, to talk about something that has been on my mind for a very long time. And I think it's likely the biggest question that should be on the minds of those that have taken a good look at the Pokémon franchise, and have looked into the future, only to utter one very important and sobering question. How long is Pokémon going to be around for all of us?
Now, I can say that this is not a question to take lightly, but also one I don't think can be properly discussed and talked about in a purely objective fashion. So, for this discussion, I'm going to be focusing less on the hard facts of how the franchise is actually doing in terms of sales figures and critical reception, and instead do what this video series is really meant to do, to take a look at it all from my own personal perspective as a veteran of the franchise. The world of Pokémon has been a huge part of my life for as long as it has been around here in the United States, and while I do have a lot of other video game series that I play and enjoy, this world is the one where a great portion of my heart and soul has been poured into. It's gotten me through difficult times and helped brighten the darkest of days, helping me move past situations that I don't know if I would have been able to progress past mentally without it.
And yet, in saying all this, I am more than aware that this cannot keep going on forever. Someday, Pokémon will end. It's just a fact, to be honest.
However, the real question here is not just how long it will last, but what sorts of factors are actually at play that will contribute or take away from its longevity and affect how we as fans will react when the signs become clear that the franchise is coming to an end. In discussing this for me, there are 6 factors at play that come together to determine the longevity of any video game series. The evolution of the franchise, changes in development and leadership behind its creation, how the fans react to the franchise, the technology involved, the economy of the world market, and the cultural impact it has had on the world. So without further ado, let's get right into the meat of it and start with the development of the Pokémon series as a whole.
I was just 7 years old when Pokémon Red and Blue came out in the US, and while I cannot precisely remember what attracted me to the franchise at first, I do know that I first observed other children playing the game at school, and was enamored with it almost immediately, with Pokémon Red becoming the very first video game I ever owned myself.
The series was very simple back then. A few games had made use of the Game Boy's link cable accessory in a way that was otherwise totally underutilized in other games, and while it was assumed that the series wasn't going to last past the second generation, the explosion of popularity of the games outside Japan made them money printers of a sort, and the cash cow's milk has never stopped flowing for Game Freak and Nintendo ever since. But the series itself has not remained the same at all, as not only have spin-off games and media of all sorts come into play alongside it, like the TCG and the anime, among many other products, it has expanded immensely in size and scope from the original pair of games, Red and Green, that started everything off. The evolution of a franchise might always have a direct impact on longevity on its own, but the successful expansion of it all helps to give it more anchor points to hold on to as it grows and develops over time. And in the case of Pokémon, I really don't think it would have become as popular as it is now without the expansion into all sorts of other media, and it has done the franchise well. Heck, people weren't sure what Pokémon Go would do when it got released, and it ended up bringing the love of the series into the real world in a way that had never been done before, and becoming the main reason now why Pokémon has become the most successful media franchise of all time.
However, a point should be made here that this must be balanced with a sense of appreciation and work regarding those that are loyal to the games, for changing too much about a franchise can lead to it becoming something vastly different than what its core fans are used to, and to possible negative reactions.
Despite how long it has been going, the franchise has always kept the battle mechanics and overall gameplay style for the mainline series the same, keeping to the traditional RPG mechanics that have made the franchise what it is, while using spin-offs to test new gameplay styles and other features just to see if they're worth fully investing in. This specific style of experimentation has worked incredibly well so far in my humble opinion, and I think that the franchise that develops on that sort of method of evolution and experimentation has a greater chance to be around longer and maintain the core audience that built it up in the first place, while also inviting newcomers that might get into the main franchise indirectly from a spin-off game or some other form of media.
The longevity of a franchise is also largely dependent upon the individuals that work to create it. And while I would like to say that things have been smooth sailing over at Game Freak the entire time this franchise has been going, I think that recent generations of games have made it pretty clear that something hasn't been going quite right over there and needs to be addressed directly.
When the franchise started out, there was only a somewhat small group of people on the team working to make these games fun, functional, and profitable, but that number has expanded dramatically in the following years and is essentially what serves to make Game Freak what it is today. The train wasn't always a smooth ride, but for the most part, Game Freak proved time and time again that they would make a competent series of games that were enjoyable for people of all ages, and the fan community was mostly satisfied. However, the last few generations have provided hints that not everything is close to how it should be, or at least how it used to be. Change is inevitable, that much is certain in the business, but many of the most prominent members of the staff that helped to put this franchise on the map have left their positions for one reason or another, and while I will not be the kind of guy to point at this being a clear sign why more recent games have been less than satisfying to some and downright unplayable to others, Scarlet and Violet in the initial release being a poster child for this latter note, I have to say that it does seem odd for many of these prominent figures to be leaving on what seems like a fairly short notice. A new influx of people with their own ideas for the franchise is fine and all, and I welcome those sorts of changes when they are good. But it almost feels like Game Freak is being pushed at this point to make content come out on a faster basis, and that sort of crunch seems to be resulting in some issues that are generally only talked about behind closed doors. As a fan, I want to have faith that it will turn out alright. But right now, there are a lot of questions being asked about the current change in leadership, and not a lot of answers are being given, a lack of transparency that may or may not hurt the franchise in more than just the short run. This has been especially the case with the initiatives that led to the cancellation of a further installation in Generation 6 beyond just X, Y, and Auras, and with some more recent issues such as Game Freak personnel crunching and developing Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet at the same time.
One example of this issue that I think should be at least mentioned revolves around the opinions that some fans have regarding the designs of many newer Pokémon. I have discussed this with some others before in private, and it appears that there is a sizable portion of the fan base that doesn't think newer Pokémon really have the same feel or charm that they once had, that they don't really feel like Pokémon anymore.
It has even been reported that for many of the lead artists in charge of the Pokémon designs over the years, especially after Generation 4, it became difficult for concepts for new creatures to be designed, and given that we're now on the 9th generation as of recording this, it could almost be seen as a bit of a burnout at this point. In the past, there seemed to be a steady pace that could allow for more time to design and create these creatures, but crunch seems to have taken over at Game Freak a bit under pressure from inside, and especially outside sources. So I suppose in the eyes of those agitated by this, it's not enough time to make something that has the same charm and feel as older Pokémon do. On the one hand, I can see where they might have a point, as new generations seem to come out with wilder and wilder designs that really push the boundaries of understanding with their appearances, but at the same time this feels like a change that is necessary for the series and its evolution. Again, it's part of the feedback that drives the growth of the franchise in unexpected directions, and while they might not always be what people expect or want, the need to keep things fresh and exciting does have to be indulged to at least partially counterbalance whatever issues that new development teams and leadership roles might cause in the franchise and its growth.
And speaking of the fans, let's give them their due spotlight on all of this as well. You can make a great game or franchise, and it could be the best in its genre, or create an entirely new genre that could potentially take the world by storm. But none of it really matters all that much if you can't get people to be interested enough in all of it to actually want to buy the games and be a part of the franchise.
This may be the ultimate issue when it comes to initial longevity in many cases, not just because of how you initially hook players in is important, but also because how you keep them and still get new players to join in on the fray is vital to plan and prepare for. Pokémon itself gave players the chance to try something that hadn't really been done successfully on a massive scale before, as while some other games like Shin Megami Tensei did commit to the idea of catching and using monsters of a sort as part of its core gameplay, Pokémon was the franchise to truly popularize and make a true journey out of it. It in turn made an impact that saw the fanbase of the game swell and grow at an incredible rate, and with the other mentioned factors in play here, the use of safe experimentation with the games and related media has helped to do what it needed to do. Hook players initially with the concept of the entire mainline series, and then use variations like the addition of new Pokémon and mechanics, and even the metagame, in order to keep people hooked, expanding and creating different forms of media to scoop up as many potential players as possible. The fact that the franchise is still going strong is an indicator that they've done a fantastic job at that, in at least some manner. But, as I already mentioned, there have been some issues as of late regarding the quality and direction of the games, as well as the individuals responsible for creating them, and fans have been very critical as of late about how they feel things are going. and a notable portion are not happy. It is true that not every franchise is going to come out strong year after year, both financially and socially among its fanbase, but Pokémon has been hit with multiple issues back and forth among fans lately. I will, however, say in defense that it is both the fans and the creators who are at fault, not just one side or the other.
Glimpses of the truth behind the operations and daily life of Game Freak have shown that a lot of times, if something does go wrong, it might not be something that can be directly blamed on the people who have tried to put their heart and souls into the franchise, and thus there needs to be some level of empathy given towards the people responsible for actually making everything. Sometimes corporate pressure needs to be addressed, and a product might not come out the way they wished, and with little that can be done about it, at least initially. They're people just like you and me, and they can often be upset too about how things have been going for what they otherwise have poured much of the time and effort into creating.
Thankfully, whether it is out of malice, a desire to make something of their own for fun, or to make what they feel Game Freak couldn't, as discussed in a previous video, fans have been making their own games as projects and activities to not just keep the franchise going in the fan community when it falters, but to give it a greater sense of depth and exploration by giving fans control of how some stories are told and what can be told to a larger audience or even a niche one. I won't go into a ton of details on this one since I made an entire V.T.P episode on the topic before, and I highly recommend you check the one out when you have the time. But in their own, the fans who commit to such acts of creation are extending the longevity of the platform more than they might realize sometimes, and in doing so are helping to make the franchise last longer over a broader demographic. This practice has only become more prevalent with the advances of new technology and plenty of ideas that have evolved over time. While there is much more detail that could be explored here, I've said my piece before, and so will simply state that they have added much to the fan community and in turn have had a mostly positive impact on the franchise in more than just its longevity, and thus deserves a special mention here.
Speaking of technology, let's talk about that next for a bit, shall we? As time has gone on, the games and franchise as a whole have developed, so has the technology that supports and acts as a base for it all.
Now, I'm not exactly the most tech-savvy individual out there, and thus can't really speak to the specifics of how technology changing has made an impact on everything from an objective standpoint, but I do think there is a big reason to that beyond just the obvious technical jargon involved. Sure, it is mostly certain that the evolution of graphics and the power of machines that can run games continues to increase with time, and has allowed for the world of Pokémon to be explored and built to a much grander scale than ever before as this all takes place. But more advanced technology does not always mean that the final product will be any better for it all, and I think that's something that is lost on too many gamers and industry leaders as a whole on the video game market. What's most important is the way that games reach out to players, and how they use advancing technology to make games more fun and engaging in turn. Pokémon, despite the changes that have occurred from technology, has stayed true to the principles that have kept it going for so long, and those principles are still what drives the core gameplay today in all mainline series games and even spin-offs where appropriate. Moreover, as funny as it might be today, the lesser focus on just pure graphics and memory and processing power, among other factors, actually gives Pokémon a bit of a leg up, as it means that it has farther to go to meet the quote-unquote standards of others, which means it has a chance to keep going longer before reaching what some consider a pinnacle for other games.
It sounds counterintuitive, but graphics have never really been the focus of the franchise to me, and indirectly, this might be a way to keep things simple so there is greater room for complexity in the future. But that's just my take on it all.
Of course, this also comes with the risk of technology backfiring a bit with glitches and the like, and while I won't spend too much time on that lingering factor, I think it is interesting to note that the longevity of the series has also been affected a bit by said bugs and glitches. In the past, these used to be a good thing actually, as it helped to build intrigue and popularity for the odd secrets that could be discovered if players knew how to manipulate the games. In Generations 1 and 2, it was very easy to create mishmashed nightmares like the classic Masigno, and while veterans like myself now understand the weird errors that are responsible for the creations of these abominations and how they are made in the first place, as kids none of us knew that. It was like discovering a world full of rare and secret creations that fueled our desire to explore the world more just to see what else we can find, and it greatly added to the time we would have spent with the games. Nowadays, this sadly has become more of an issue than of help, given recent titles and the errors that have been springing forth from their faulty programming, but it is funny to think that these issues that we complain about nowadays were things that made us appreciate the games even more as children, even if there were others out there that knew it was a sign of a broken game and not a deep, complex one.
Next, let's talk about the economics of the situation. And I'll be frank in saying that I don't have the most intimate knowledge of how the world market fares, but I can speak to something that I think everyone can understand. How well the games and associated media do in terms of sales.
It's a very simple concept, of course. If something sells well, you go with it, and if not, you don't try it again, or at the very least not for a while. The sales figures involved in all of this are out there for anyone to look at, but I think that for me, the biggest takeaway from all this information is that the series is still going strong because we keep paying for it as a fan base. And I have to actually take a moment to speak on this because there are some people, to me, that are just not only contradictory, but generally idiotic in their messages and assumptions on this topic. I will note that I never really hear a lot of negative press for the series prior to Generation 6, and maybe that was just because the games were always getting better and better for all. It's not my place to put words in the mouths of others. However, I will take note that I've seen more and more people that complain about how things feel the same with the mainline series, or how Game Freak isn't really innovating or listening to fans, or they're taking advantage of fans with games that are really similar to previous entries. Generation 7 got hit by that argument the hardest, which might arguably explain why the games pivoted to DLC in the next generation, but that's not what I'd like to make a heavy note on. The economics of the situation really dictate that you go with what is financially successful and leave behind what isn't, but there are a lot of people out there that complain about the games, trashing them online with comments and whatnot, and then go ahead and buy the games anyways.
To which I say, if you don't like what you see or don't think the franchise is worth it anymore, then why are you buying or reviewing the game still? Why are you making so much noise about the products if you haven't been a big part of the franchise for several generations? If you're going to make a point, how about trying to show it? Because the fact of the matter is that if we keep buying what is being sold to us and don't show our stance with our wallets, sometimes major changes are just not going to happen.
In that way, positively, we are extending the longevity of the series, but also ensuring that Game Freak will keep doing its thing and won't be told to do something that we as fans might ask for, or at least not all the time when it makes sense. It's not that hard, people, and heck, some have actually committed to this with a number of players who got copies of the newest game, Scarlet and Violet, returning and getting refunds to the games because of the numerous issues. This is a sign that things need to change, and it's good that it seems, hopefully, that this has made its point and will both extend longevity and quality in trying times.
Lastly, I want to speak on what I see as the biggest impacting factor when it comes to the longevity of any game franchise, and in essence it is a larger scale combination of all the above factors in its own way, and that is the culture that the franchise has created. And let's be honest, for Pokémon, it is huge.
And this isn't a case where the series seemed like a niche thing that just gained tons of traction over time. While it was fairly successful in Japan originally, as soon as it hit markets overseas a few years later, the entire franchise exploded into a massive cultural phenomenon that took the world by storm. Or at least it sure as heck did over here in the United States. I was there at just the perfect age to fully experience and indulge entirely in the first Pokemon craze that came with the first two generations of the franchise, and it was such a good time to be a kid with it all. I was spoiled rotten over it, and I don't regret a moment of it, as it just instantly became this huge cultural icon that some feared would collapse. And it did to some degree, but it established a massive fan base of hardcore enthusiasts that to this day are still around for the most part, and it's allowed the franchise to seep into the world in so many ways that it's almost shocking. People might assume that, sure, there's the games, the anime, and the cards, and all the sorts of memorabilia, but that's probably it, right? Not like it had any other huge impacts, right? Wrong. Probably the coolest sign of how deep the culture goes is that there have been numerous incidents where new species of life forms in the real world have been named using the names of classic Pokemon, and as a scientist myself, it genuinely makes me smile every time I see or hear about someone doing this. You have to understand, that is a huge deal because those names will often go on to live in scientific studies forever, or at least for as long as a change of those names is not needed. And then, let's not forget the second great popularity explosion that happened with the debut of Pokemon Go. Sure, that craze also did die down as well, but there is still a solid core fan base for that game as well, I myself being among that large fan base, that keeps it going and has helped to integrate it with the rest of the franchise and make it a vital component of it all if you want the full experience for what the world of Pokemon can truly now offer. AR has allowed this game to bring Pokemon into the real world, and that technology is still developing as we speak, so there is no telling just how much more advanced it will go to bring even more people under the fold of the Pokemon franchise as a whole. To me, The culture of the franchise is indeed a combination of everything else that has been mentioned already, but still stands as a separate factor because it means that the franchise may have longevity to it that could last well beyond the games at the end of it all. And if there is one thing that the video game industry as a whole has proven, it's that if a series is beloved by fans for some reason or another, even in the absence of games and other media, it will always be there, ready to be rebooted and brought back to the public masses once more to give the franchise another chance at stardom, even if it might be short-lived.
So, with all these different points on how the longevity of a franchise is affected by various factors and how they contribute to all of it, it comes back around to the same question. How long is Pokémon going to last? And the answer, as far as I'm concerned, it'll be here for a while for sure. Likely a long, long time.
I can't say for how long, but I think that it's in a position where, with some improvements to the few issues that are starting to hold things back a bit, it's going to be lasting for much longer than some might otherwise anticipate. However, as much as there is optimism for the future of the franchise, I think it still needs to be stated that, from my end, there will still be a very sad day when everything does come to an end. And I honestly don't know what I will do with myself then. On a personal level, this franchise means more to me than almost anything else in the world as far as video games and culture goes, and I honestly don't know if I could function without it. See, that's the thing with video games and major franchises that so many fail to understand. We really don't know the long-term effects of the video game industry on society and global culture as a whole. To me, it honestly feels like we won't know the true longevity of these franchises and their effects on others until they have lasted at least one full human lifespan, so we can see how it has changed the lives of those that were born at the emergence of the first true industry for video games to the day they died. And while it might be getting closer to that day by day, we still have a while to go. With video games evolving and changing at a pace that, in the context of a length of written history, is barely a blip in time, there is much that cannot be predicted with all of it.
But I do not want to leave this special video on a sad note. Pokémon as a franchise in all of its media forms has touched me personally and made me the man I am today in ways that I can scarcely begin to talk about here. I know that one day it will come to an end. But unlike most, I won't just sit around and tell stories about it to others and simply say, it was something alright, or it was great while it lasted. No. Because I refuse to let it simply become just that, a memory. The franchise is so much more to me, and always will be, so no matter what, I will always find a way to keep it alive inside of me, and I know I'm not alone there. Together, fans will unite in time, and even when the end does seem like it is in sight, we will find a way to keep it alive, through our words, our actions, and those that we hold dear. We will always keep it alive. So I ask you then, in these times, to always strive for the best. Even if you are merely an observer to the franchise as it grows and develops into the future, never let the love and appreciation for it ever die. It might have been created for us by others, but it was their world once, and still is, and now has been shared with all of us. Keep the dream and the reality it creates alive, and we may very well help to keep this franchise going into a future that will hopefully be filled with more positivity and change than we ever thought to be imaginable. With that, thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you all on the next episode of the V.T.P. Thank you for watching this video. It brings me great joy to be able to speak to you all in the world each and every time we meet like this, to explore the many different facets of both the world of Pokemon as we know it, and the world as we live it, through every adventure we have with Pokemon by our side. If you'd like to, please subscribe, ring the bell and all that jazz, to keep yourself updated on content uploads and other materials of the like. You can also follow me on Twitter if you'd like to know right away when something new is uploaded, and my written works, from which most of this is based on, can be found on DeviantArt. Links to both can be found in the description down below. Remember that the world of Pokemon is a place full of wonder and mystery, and you never know what to expect. So, stay vigilant, keep watch, and always be prepared for the unexpected. Until next time, trainers and friends of all sorts, have a wonderful time.